Good morning, or depending on when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and I was always told I had a voice for radio, so today I'm continuing my in-depth look at the rotation by looking at the expansion FlashFire. Now, I've already done my quick analysis, my, I suppose, opening gambit for the rotation. That video is proving pretty popular. Go and have a look, there is a link in the description, and I have done my in-depth look at X and Y, but I promised you, lovely ladies and gentlemen, a complete look at the rotation, so here we go. Now, I'm not giving you the same code as before because, well, you should have watched the previous video. Starting off, we have Charizard EX, except he's not being rotated. He was reprinted as kind of a promo around Generations, and it's a really cool looking card, and you can have a jumbo version of it, etc. I should have bought a German version of this. I didn't. I feel bad about myself. I apologise. But we are losing the Mega Charizards, although I'm sure if I'm wrong I shall get 17 identical comments down below. Not that I'm bitter, of course. Now, neither of these Mega Charizards were ever actually particularly good, but they both did 300 damage, and this excited me just a little bit. Enough that I at least want to have a quick mention of them. We have the Fire one, 300 damage for 5 energy, and then it did a bit of damage to itself. Now, they even released a Pokemon tool to deal with this in this set, which was very cute, as if we were all suddenly going to start playing it. I mean, spoiler alert, we weren't, but it was nice of them anyway. It was a completely fire type, so you could use cards like Blacksmith, which was released in this set, to get the energy on. There were 3 colorless energy, so you could use a double colorless energy there as well, if you so wished. It was never going to be hugely great. Protection Cube helped, I will say, but it was never going to be amazing. Similarly, the other Mega Charizard X also did 300 damage, but involved you discarding the top 5 cards of your deck. Again, double colorless was totally on the table for this, pun intended, as was Blacksmith. You could even use Reshiram for this, if you so wished. And again, it was never going to be a particularly great card. There was just, I mean, honestly, there was just a little bit too much going on here. It was just never particularly destined to be great. This makes me a little bit sad, but there we go. We had 2 Charizards. They both had the potential to do 300 damage, and yeah, just never going to work. The Reshiram, by the way, was the Roaring Skies one that could attach a fire energy from your hand to one of your dragon Pokemon. So you couldn't use it for the fire type, but you could use it for the dragon type. There we go. Hope that makes a whole bunch of sense. Sorry, Mega Charizard, you were never destined to be. One card that did see an awful lot of play for quite some time was Pyroar. Now, Pyroar had the ability Intimidating Main, and it was all about intimidating Main. Prevent effects of attacks done by basic Pokemon. Now, for a while, we had the format completely dominated by these plasma decks, Thundurus, Deoxys, Kyurem, etc. So a card which could completely lock them out of the game was spectacular. Now, you had to be a little bit careful here, because you had to make sure that you didn't just give your opponent a whole bunch of bench prizes. But if you could get down to the situation where all you had was a Pyroar, and then your opponent had no counter, then you win the game. Simple as that. And people would use this. It was a good deck for a while. The problem is, we had Hex Maniac, and now we've got Garbodor back as well. And quite simply, between Hex Maniac and Garbodor, it's way too easy to get rid of abilities. As soon as you get rid of abilities, Pyroar essentially just becomes a Pokemon that hits for terrible, 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 terrible damage. Nobody wants to play it. What's that, 90 damage if you discard a fire energy attached to Pyroar for free energy to begin with, even bearing in mind you can use Blacksmith and or double colorless energy. This was never going to be good. And kind of like Slurpuff in the previous video, you've got to give a bit of a shout out to Pyroar here, because Well, Pyroar had two cards, and they were both really good. You've got Intimidating main Pyroar, which blocked abilities. Then you've got the Phantom Forces Pyroar that had Flare Command that allowed you to essentially have a Lysander effect with your ability. It was really good. They're both being rotated. Now, we are getting a Pyroar in Steam Siege. It's not particularly good. And a Pyroar break in Steam Siege. Could be alright, I suppose. But the reality is, Pyroar's gone, ladies and gentlemen. Pyroar used to be cool, and now Pyroar is not cool anymore. Pyroar and Slurpuff, for my money, are the two Pokemon that are most hard done by this rotation. And if that is not the extra information that you tuned into this video to get, I'm sorry. We're losing Milotic, another Pokemon like Pyroar that every time it's released, it seems to be pretty good. Now, this Milotic had the ability Energy Grace. You did have to knock it out and give your opponent a prize, but you can attach free basic energy from your discard pile to one of your non-EX Pokemon. Now, this never saw a huge amount of play. It was very much a rogue deck kind of thing. People would play this card, with non-EX decks to try and get weird little combos going on. It never saw a huge amount of play. It never got particularly good. It seems like the kind of thing where maybe there was a little bit of potential, but it just never saw great play. By the way, when I was talking about Pyroar, I should probably have mentioned it could have been really good against decks like Night March if it wasn't for Hexmaniac. Moving on then, what else do we have? We have a Dusknoir, another Pokemon that pretty much always tends to be interesting when it's released, shall we say. And this Dusknoir basically allowed you to pile a whole bunch of damage on him, which seems a little bit rude, quite frankly. You could move all your damage onto him, and then, of course, you could use a card like Max Potion to heal all the damage off. This was another card which, when on my podcast PTCG Radio, there's often cards where my analysis of them, my prediction for their usage, essentially comes down to there is going to be somebody who breaks this card. It's not going to see a huge amount of play because it's too clunky or too expensive or whatever. In the case of Dusknoir, it's too clunky. But sooner or later, somebody's going to come around and make a deck, and we're all going to go, oh man, I wish I'd thought of that. And I thought Dusknoir was going to be one of those cards. Certainly the ability to move, 12 damage counters off of your active Pokemon, or indeed even one of your benched, onto him is amazing. I could see this being played with a fighting Pokemon and Focus Sash. Pokemon gets hit, you move all the energy to Dusknoir, or the damage to Dusknoir, you Max Potion. Let's say something like, a Regirock. They hit Regirock, you move all the damage to Dusknoir and then Max Potion it. Or they KO your Dusknoir, but that's fine because your Regirock and Focus Sash remain. I should have made that deck. It's probably terrible, to be honest, but point is, lots of potential, never saw a huge amount of play, but I bring it up here because I don't just want to talk about the decks that are going that we did use, but I want to mention some of the cards which maybe if they'd stayed in the format we would have played more. Toxicroak EX, it's the double colorless energy attack, it's triple poison. Poisoned and free damage counters between turns. Fun little ruling fact here. If you use Burbank City Gym, that would actually go up to 5 damage counters between turn, because Burbank City Gym didn't say it goes up to 3, it said it did 2 more. So this plus Burbank City Gym, you can actually get them up to 5 damage counters between turn. Pretty funky. This saw the most play really as an Aegislash EX counter. So decks like Vespiquen Vileplume that really relied on double colourless energy did not like Aegislash, who blocked attacks from Pokemon that relied on special energy. So you would come along with Toxicroak using a double colourless energy, poison Aegislash, they would struggle to get a one-hit KO, you would win, life is good. Fortress, or Fortress, or however you want to pronounce it. I should ask someone how the correct pronunciation. I have people who work at Pokemon, or not people who work, I know someone who works at Pokemon, and every so often I'll ask her what the official pronunciation is, and then I immediately forget it. But one day, I will know this bad boy's pronunciation properly. And no, it's not pronunciation, even though it probably is. Fortress was really fun. It had the ability Fawn Tempest. You evolve, you put 1 damage counter on each of your opponent's Pokemon. You combine that with Forest of Giant Plants because Pineco is a grass Pokemon, and you can evolve as soon as you like. And there were people that would use this with cards like Super Scoop Up to try and essentially donk your opponent by just using Fortress over and over and over and over again on your first turn of the game. You could combine it with Latios CX to do 60 damage with a Muscle Band, and it was kind of funky. It was a one-shot deck. It was an all-or-nothing YOLO deck. It never particularly worked, but the idea of being able to drop all those damage counters and knock out your opponent's only Pokemon on the first turn of the game was just a little bit too enticing to not at least give it a go. Speaking of interesting metal Pokemon, Durant, he had a very niche look in the format. It was the attack chip-off. Now, this did David Hockman use this in the Greninja Mirror for a while. You discard cards in your opponent's hand at random until they have 4 cards in their hand. What does this do? It basically tries to screw over your opponent by going, remember that handful of awesome cards you had? Yeah, they're all gone. And you could use this to get rid of really important cards. Maybe in the Greninja Mirror you get lucky and discard some, Greninjas so they don't have them, or even just discard enough cards to slow them down, because in the Greninja Mirror, if you set up and start using your abilities a turn or two before your opponent, you will win the game. It was a niche tech, but it saw a little bit of play. It deserves a mention, gosh darn it. Speaking of which, Druddigon. And here we are talking about the revenge attack. Nice and simply, if one of your Pokemon was knocked out by damage from an opponent's attack, i.e. not knocked out by Greninja's ability, not knocked out by poison, things of that nature, damage from an attack, also dropping damage counters, think Silent Fear on Trevenant Break, would not activate this. It had to be damage, not special conditions or damage counters or abilities. You could do 90 damage for a double colourless energy, and this was enough damage to knock out something like a Pumpkaboo or a Vespiquen, or things of that nature. When you're trading with non-EX decks, this was pretty gosh darn useful. Didn't see a huge amount of play, but it saw a little bit of play here and there. Now, there was a Dragalge. Now, this Dragalge did get reprinted as a promo, but it was the FlashFire promo. It's X and Y 10, and we rotated up to X and Y 35. Sorry, Dragalge. Interesting ability, Poison Barrier, stopped your opponent retreating if they were poisoned. Especially when we had Hypnotoxic Laser. There was a time where the two sets overlapped. People tried to use Dragalge. Never saw a huge amount of play, but it saw enough play to see a little bit of play. Now, Mega Kangaskhan. This, not unlike Venusaur in our previous video, really was hurt by never having a Spirit Link. 230 HP, pretty good, although the fighting weakness hurt. Wham Bam Punch, 100 damage. And it led you to flip a whole bunch of coins until you get tails, 30 more for each heads. Muscle Band, 2 heads, 180 damage, you win. The fact that you had to end your turn really hurt, but people would play this with Aromatisse so that you could move all the energy off Mega Kangaskhan, Max Potion, and move it back on. Shameless plug to try and attract more viewers to the channel. I played the Diamond Minecart himself, Dan Middleton, at UK Nationals a couple of years ago. The last Nationals I played and didn't commentate. And he was using this card. Have I got an extra 100,000 viewers by mentioning Dan? Probably not, but a man can hope. That's the last Dan reference, by the way, so if you're tuning in to hear about Dan, it's over. Miltank! Powerful Friends. Another card that I used at a tournament, not to great effect, unfortunately. 80 damage for a single energy on a basic if you've got a stage 2 in play. Nice and simple. You could use it with Vileplume, lock your opponent with trainers, hit for 80 with Miltank, and then people used it with stuff like, if they were playing a Crobat deck, it was one card. You put one Miltank in, if you're playing energy, you can use it. Wasn't particularly great, but it was kind of fun at times. So let's move on and have a quick look at the trainers we are losing. We're losing Blacksmith, and this really hurts. But quite simply, any fire deck you ever wanted to play is made better by Blacksmith. Attaching 2 energy from your discard pile to one of your fire Pokemon. Want to play Flareon? Yet it's made better with Blacksmith. Want to play Entei? It's made better with Blacksmith. The new Volcanion card? You see where I'm going with this. They're all made better with Blacksmith. Although, to be fair, Volcanion might actually be good enough without it. That's not the point. It upsets me. Fiery Torch never saw a huge amount of play. It has the same effect as Scorched Earth. Discard a fire energy from your hand, draw 2 cards. Scorched Earth can also do it with fighting. It gets energy in the discard for Blacksmith and allows you to draw cards. Scorched Earth was just better. Fiery Torch saw a very small amount of play. Lysander is a huge card that is played in basically every deck in the format, but it was reprinted in Ancient Origins. Magnetic Storm never really saw much play, but it gets a mention here for 2 reasons. First of all, it saw a little bit of play here and there. Secondly, it's basically a reprint of Ruins of Alph, and I loved Ruins of Alph from my old Donphan Prime deck, so I've got to mention it. Palpad. Shuffle 2 supporter cards from your discard pile into your deck. It meant that you could have another 2 Lysanders, another 2 Junipers, etc. Bit of play here and there for when you really wanted to reuse your supporters, but it was never a hugely played card. One that really was Pokemon Center Lady. Getting rid of all special conditions, 60 damage, pretty good. The good news is, it was reprinted in Generations. Life is good. Pokemon Fan Club also has seen a little bit of play here and there. Search for 2 basic Pokemon and put them into your hand, and this meant that you could search for a Shaymin EX and something else. That's pretty gosh darn good. So this did see a little bit of play, but the good news is it was also reprinted in Generations and Fates Collide. We're losing Sacred Ash, that's a little bit sad. Shuffle 5 Pokemon from your discard pile into your deck. As I mentioned in my previous video, Super Rod gives you the versatility of being able to go ahead and, get basic energy or Pokemon, but Sacred Ash is 5 Pokemon and that's awesome. Startling Megaphone is a big loss because we're also losing Zerosic. These were the 2 best ways to get rid of tools. Stranding a Pokemon in the active and then getting rid of its float stone so it couldn't retreat. Not an option anymore. Getting rid of Fighting Fury bouts so those basic Pokemon don't have obscene HPs. Seriously, Zygarde with a Fighting Fury bout, 230 damage. No thanks. 230 HP, I should say. I could edit that out, but I'm not going to. Also, Garbodor. How are you going to get rid of the tool? Oh wait, you're not. Yes, you can Lysander it active and KO it, but Startling Megaphone and Zerosic going makes tools very safe. Trick Shovel! Discard the top card of your deck or your opponent's deck. Generally, it would be your opponent's deck. This was always a fun little card that didn't see a huge amount of play, but every time your opponent went to use it, you had that horrible flash of, oh no, please no, please no. And then every so often, you'd be playing Vespiquen Vileplume and they'd hit one of your 4 double colourless energies. Or you'd be playing Greninja and they'd hit one of your breaks or your Super Rod or something. Or you'd have a completely unplayable hand and they'd hit your Professor Sycamore. And it would just be hilarious, but not for you. And finally, Ultra Ball. Brilliant card, best Pokemon search we have in the format. But it was reprinted in both Roaring Skies and Fates Collide, so we call. So I hope this has continued on our journey of looking at the rotation, looking at the cards that will be legal in the upcoming set, the upcoming competitive scene, and those that won't. We have got more videos coming. There is a Furious Fist video coming. There is a Phantom Forces video coming. And there is a Decks That Will Be Good video coming. And after all of that, I've got some nice alternate format videos, which I think you will find quite enjoyable. At least I hope so. Otherwise, it will be sad. Plenty more Pokemon TCG stuff coming. And yes, I've got some Pokken Tournament videos as well. Don't you worry your pretty little heads about it. Usual things, there's a comment section. Tell me which cards you're looking forward to losing. Tell me which cards you wish you weren't losing, etc. There's a like button, click it. There's a subscribe button, click it. You've already clicked it, you say? Homework, find someone else to click it. And the most important thing as always, look after yourselves till next time. Thank you very much for watching. My name is Ross and you've been watching PTCG Radio.